Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to start our ceremony. Dear guests, kindly take your seats. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this event. Please take your seats. We're about to start. Before we actually commence the opening ceremony, please allow me to make some housekeeping announcements. First, we kindly invite all participants to turn off their mobile phones and to keep them in silent mode during the duration of the ceremony. The opening ceremony will be, the opening ceremony and the ministerial interactive discussions tomorrow will be streamed online via YouTube. So please be aware. In addition, many of you should have received already an invitation for dinner hosted by the Swiss government for all the ministers and deputy ministers. One of my colleagues will be going around your seats ensuring that you confirm. Thank you very much. After the opening ceremony, there will be a photo, a group photo, and we will guide you to the location of the photos. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the opening ceremony of the high-level segment of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. Before inviting our first speaker to take the floor, I would like to take the opportunity to reiterate our appreciation to our donors, Canada, China, Finland, Germany, Japan, Norway, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, whose generous support to our 2025 COPs has made this high-level segment possible. Now, without any further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Katrin Schneeberger, Director of the Federal Office for the Environment of Switzerland, to give her opening remarks. Ms. Schneeberger, please come to the podium here. Thank you very much.
Madams and Mr. Presidents of the three conventions, Madam Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Madam Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization, Mr. Executive Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to Geneva for the joint meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. I extend a warm welcome to this city, which embodies dialogue, cooperation, and multilateral ambition. Geneva is a global hub for environmental governance, particularly in the field of chemicals and waste. Through the work conducted here within the BRS conventions, the Minamata Convention, the Global Framework on Chemicals at WHO and ILO, this city brings to light realities that too often remain hidden in the shadows. The theme that brings us together this year, Make the Invisible Visible, is both powerful and highly relevant. It reminds us that chemicals, though often invisible to the naked eye, have a profound impact on our societies, delivering undeniable benefits, but also posing risks to human health and to the environment. This theme also invites us to look ahead, to make tomorrow's challenges visible, to recognize that pollution, hazardous waste, and persistent substances are not invisible externalities, but tangible realities that we must confront collectively. Since the last BRS COP in 2023, the global governance on chemicals and waste has taken important steps forward. The adoption of the Global Framework on Chemicals marked a major milestone. It provides all stakeholders with an ambitious roadmap. At the same time, the ongoing negotiations for a legally binding instrument on plastics, as well as the forthcoming Science Policy Panel on Chemicals and Waste, will further strengthen our common framework for action. In the face of interlinked environmental crises, pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are more relevant than ever. They offer concrete tools to inform, to prevent, and to act. The synergies between the three conventions are a major asset. They allow us to coordinate our efforts, avoid duplication, and adopt an integral approach. Geneva plays a key role here, particularly by fostering dialogue between these conventions and the Minamata Convention. Moreover, the upcoming round of negotiations on the plastic instrument will also be held here later this summer. Yet we must also acknowledge that multilateralism is facing challenges. Geopolitical tensions and financial crises can at times weaken our ability to act collectively. That is why this conference and this high-level segment in particular are also valuable opportunities to reinforce international dialogue, a space where exchange and trust prevail. Excellencies, dear colleagues, making the invisible visible also means shedding light on our achievements, our commitments, and the tremendous potential of multilateralism. Together, we have already demonstrated that collective action can deliver results. Let us continue to make these conventions living, ambitious, and forward-looking instruments. In the coming days, we have the opportunity to do just that, by listing under the conventions the substances that warrant it, and by strengthening key mechanisms of the conventions, particularly the PIC procedure under the Basel Convention, for which several important improvement measures have been proposed. A successful BRS COP will also send a positive signal to the plastic negotiation. The INC 5.2 meeting in Geneva presents a critical opportunity for the international community to finalize the legally binding agreement to address plastic pollution across the entire life cycle. Agreeing ambitious global rules during INC 5.2 will be essential to mitigate the environmental, social, and economic threats posed by plastic pollution. In this context, the BRS conventions have a role to play, and the existing expertise and structure in Geneva is significant. I wish us all fruitful discussions, a spirit of openness, and a conference that raises to the scale of the challenges and the hopes that bring us all together. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I would now like to invite Ms. Inger Anderson, United Nations Undersecretary and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to give her opening remarks. Ms. Anderson, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. And to the three presidents of the Basel, the Rotterdam, and the Stockholm Conventions, my greetings and my thanks. To ministers and ambassadors and delegates here present, thank you for being here, and my greetings. And to my dear colleagues on this panel, some of whom I've had the pleasure of journeying with for years, and others shorter time, to Jürgen Vogele from the World Bank, to Beth Bechtel, and of course, my dear colleague Rolf Payet, thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, when waste is not managed in an environmentally safe manner, people and the planet pay the price. And while chemicals play an important role in our societies, when improperly managed, they drive what we refer to as a triple planetary crisis: the crisis of climate change, the crisis of nature loss, biodiversity loss, land loss, and the crisis of pollution and waste. So sustainable solutions to this crisis arise from multilateral environmental agreements, such as the Basel, the Rotterdam and the Stockholm agreements, which protect human health and protect the environment from the risk of exposure and from the hazardous chemicals and waste. We at UNEP are proud to host the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, and indeed we are proud to host a total of 17 conventions that member states have entrusted to UNEP. The BRS conventions play a critical role across the spectrum of conventions that we host, from the framework, from the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, or indeed to some of the frameworks while they may not be legally binding, such as the framework on chemicals and waste. And they are linked, as we just heard from our dear host, Catherine Schneeberger, State Secretary, they are linked to the undergoing negotiations on plastic. And so today you will be considering ways to expand and ways to strengthen solutions through the BRS conventions in the areas of pollution control, in the areas of circulation, and yes, in the area of financing. Before you begin your discussions, please allow me some reflections and some questions that I hope that you will reflect on in these areas. First, on strengthening the action to prevent pollution and chemical exposure. Now, we have to understand that pollution hazards and exposure presence are risks. Persistent organic pollutants, for example, accumulate in living organisms, which means higher health risks such as cancer, endocrine disruption, and birth defects. And that does impose a heavy burden on healthcare systems. And of course, a very heavy toll on the families and the communities impacted. The Stockholm Convention is phasing out POPs, and it now covers 34, but the impact of pollution and exposure cannot be solved fast enough through a chemical-by-chemical approach. And so, as you look at the span and the effort of the Stockholm Convention, let us also be sure that we look at opportunities to look at safety across the entire chemical sector. And that is, of course, where the global framework on chemicals comes in. And also, as we look a little bit into the future, let us not forget that green chemicals now exist, but they're still very much a niche market. So we must explore, and I urge you to do so, how we build on this new sector and how we can leapfrog to this broader set of safety of the new chemicals that we can develop. So the question here then for us is, how can the BRS conventions help to ensure that the environment and human safety across the entire sectors is in place? And how can governments create policy incentives to promote innovation from industry to scale green and safe chemicals? These are questions for us to consider today. My second point deals with circularity. The Basel Convention is ensuring proper transboundary movement where facilities exist to process waste. The Rotterdam Convention is ensuring prior informed consent. But we can't expect these two conventions to do it all for us. Each year, 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste are generated. Plastic waste, e-waste are rising. Recycling rates are low across the board. So we have to avoid producing waste in the first place through smart upstream extended producer responsibility to name just one entry point. We've seen progress in waste as a resource being seen in a number of national jurisdictions, and efforts to grow circular economies are really popping up everywhere. There are many new jobs coming online from innovations in product safety and in products designed for durability, for reuse, and for easier recyclability. So my question to you is, how can governments further incentivize circular markets? And my third and final point deals with creating the right fiscal environment for reducing pollution and waste, and for increasing sound management of chemicals. And here I want to give a big shout out to the Global Environment Facility, which has been absolutely critical in supporting the BRS Convention, particularly, of course, the Stockholm Convention. The next GF replenishment is key. Moving to chemical safety across the entire sector will require the GEF9 strategy to evolve, guided by governments, and will require significant replenishment. Smaller funds may be needed to prioritize to avoid, smaller funds need to be prioritized such that we do not have them fragmenting what goes into the GEF. So let us be sure then that the GEF in its replenishment is strong. Beyond this, of course, governments need to create the right fiscal policy environment and unlock innovative financing. And here, as we see in many countries, EPR, extended producer responsibility, can make companies responsible for financing waste management and circular economy approaches. We see in UNEP over 60 countries today that have EPR in place. Allocations from public budgets can also leverage private sector financing as a fiscal policy. So my question on the financing issue is to governments: how can you leverage finance from other sectors, such as, for example, insurance companies, banks of all stripes, export credit agencies, securities and exchange commissions? Friends, excellencies, strong efforts in these areas, moving to sectoral chemical safety, unlocking new circular economy market opportunities, and unleashing the power of fiscal policy and public funds can make a massive difference. To support the work on the BRS conventions, to back other global goals that are linked to the chemical and waste and pollution management, and to the health and the wealth of every nation and every person on the planet. As I close out, I would like to extend my deep, deep appreciation to the government of Switzerland. They are the host to 5 of the UNEP conventions: the Basel, the Rotterdam, the Stockholm, the CITES, and the CMS, and the Minamata Convention. And they are a place of environmental activism. They've also generously reached out for us to be able to host the last round of INC 5.2 here in beautiful Geneva. We know that when we are here, we have the wind in our backs, we have the support of the host, and we look forward to a successful BRS and a successful INC 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Now, I have the pleasure to invite to the podium Ms. Beth Bechtel, Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, to provide her opening remarks. Ms. Bechtel, you have the floor.
Excellencies, presidents of the conventions, ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, with all protocols observed, it is my dear honor to join you today on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations at such an important convening. I would also like to extend a very special thank you to Inger, to Rolf, and UNEP colleagues for their leadership with these conventions and for being such an important partner to FAO in the leadership and Secretariat convenings of the Rotterdam Convention. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions represent a global commitment to safeguarding human health and the environment from hazardous chemicals and waste. And today, these conventions are more critical than ever as we face the interconnected crises that we know all too well. Climate change challenges, pollution, biodiversity loss, and equally important, food insecurity. Today, 1 in every 11 persons on this planet faces hunger. That's 1 in 5 when we look at the African continent. And yet at the same time, over 1/3 of the world's population cannot afford a healthy diet. Our SDG goals and indicators are off track, our statistics are going in the wrong direction, And sadly, we open too many meetings with these discouraging and negative data points and statistics. We cannot afford to become complacent or comfortable with these metrics. From FAO's perspective, agriculture lies both at the heart of the challenge, but critically plays an important role in creating the solutions for these challenges. It is a sector impacted by the crises, but offers tremendous potential for innovative and policy and data-driven solutions to solve them. Its transformation, in fact, the transformation of agri-food systems is essential to achieving the goals of these very conventions. So we commend the progress that has been made under the BRS conventions, particularly in promoting transparency, sound chemicals management, and the phasing out of some of the most harmful substances that have been used in decades in agricultural production. But significant challenges remain, especially in agriculture. Highly hazardous pesticides, poor waste management, and chemical pollution undermine the sustainability of agri-food systems. They threaten biodiversity, and they ultimately endanger the lives of so many people living in rural situations and communities. The improper use of pesticides, with evidence that as much as 80% of agricultural soils here in Europe contain pesticide residues, simply highlights the need for action to protect soil health and also critical ecosystems. At FAO, we are deeply committed to ensuring that productivity gains in crops, livestock, fisheries, and forestry do not come at the cost of human health and environment. A more with less approach is what's needed to produce more food, critically needed in these challenging times, while at the same time using fewer resources and chemicals. This is a principle, seemingly simple, but incredibly complex, that guides our organization's efforts to help countries transform their agri-food systems sustainably. And it's very positive that through innovation and collaboration, we are making headway. Innovative solutions in some parts of the world are already making a difference. For example, in Pakistan, FAO is helping turn banana crop residues into sustainable bio-based textiles, advancing a circular economy, tackling water pollution, given that the textile production itself accounts for 20% of global clean water contamination. The principles of a sustainable bioeconomy, prevention and substitution, circularity and resource efficiency, and collaboration across value chains all align closely with the BRS conventions and can be powerful drivers of implementation. However, achieving lasting change requires integrated, cross-sectoral solutions and strong collaboration among all of us in this room, among UN entities and partners, policymakers, scientists, civil society, academia, and the private sector. And please, 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 do not forget the fact that farmers as well need to be at the table as we talk about these very important transformational topics. I want to highlight here again the very successful partnership that exists between FAO and UNEP in particular, especially our over 20 years of cooperation under the Rotterdam Convention. And I do think it is a model of how shared commitments can deliver very meaningful results. So as we look ahead, I challenge all of us to surface and scale up these innovative solutions to make, as we know from this convention's theme, invisible solutions visible. We must also secure the human and financial resources needed and embrace innovative financing models that I'm sure we will hear more about from my distinguished colleagues on the panel that can unlock action where it is needed most. All eyes are on us today. And as Catherine and Inger have both referenced, some of those eyes are coming with trust, and others are coming with skepticism and doubt. The world is watching, and expectations are incredibly high. It is our collective responsibility to drive momentum, deliver results, and address this triple planetary crisis while also advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. There is more work for all of you in this room to do over the next several days, but it is already clear from the last few days that there is momentum, there is incredibly strong engagement among you and your delegations, and most importantly, there is an opportunity to be seized here, now, today. On behalf of all of us at FAO, let me simply close by reaffirming our shared commitment to work closely with each and every one of you for healthier ecosystems, for improved food security, and better lives for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bechtel. I would now like to invite Mr. Hamad Shamimi, President of the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Rotterdam Convention, to deliver opening remarks on behalf of the Presidents of the Conferences of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. Mr. Shamimi, you have the floor.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor to welcome you all to the high-level segment of the 2025 meetings of the Conferences of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. I have the privilege of addressing you today on behalf of the three presidents of the Conferences of the Parties, and I thank you for your leadership and commitment at this critical juncture for our planet and our shared future. This event takes place at a time of growing global awareness of the interconnected crises of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. At the heart of these challenges lies the unsustainable production and use of hazardous chemical wastes, affecting not only our environment but the health of people, especially among the most vulnerable populations. This is why the theme of this year's meetings, Make Visible the Invisible, Sound Management of Chemicals and Wastes, and the sub-themes that we will be exchanging views on at this high-level segment: pollution, circularity, and means of implementation are not only relevant, but also timely. They speak to the need for a transformative shift in how we produce, use, and manage chemicals and waste throughout their life cycle. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are essential, global, legally binding instruments to address pollution at its source and to drive individual and collective efforts towards circularity. But for them to succeed, implementation must be strengthened. This means having comprehensive legal frameworks, access to scientific information and expertise, and robust enforcement mechanisms. We must work together to strengthen national capacities and ensure that technical and financial assistance reaches those countries that need it the most. Distinguished delegates, as ministers and senior officials, you are the stewards of this global effort. The messages you convey and the partnerships you forge here will help chart a more sustainable path forward. Let us seize this opportunity not only to reaffirm our commitment to the conventions, but to accelerate real action on the ground and send a strong signal to the world that we are ready to act together, and that pollution prevention, circularity, and implementation are not isolated goals, but shared pillars of a sustainable future. Thank you for your dedication and leadership. My fellow presidents and I look forward to fruitful and inspiring discussions at this high-level segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shamimi. I now have the pleasure to invite you to watch a very short curtain raiser video, which we hope will inspire your discussions over the next few days.
Hazardous chemicals and wastes are all around us, but so are the solutions. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are powerful examples of how international cooperation can progress our shared objectives and serve as a model for our future protection of the planet. Today, we renew political commitment. Today, we recognize our progress and we raise ambition. Today, we make visible the invisible.
We are here to work, we are committed, and we want changes to take place. We want to reach these targets, the biodiversity targets, the climate targets, all the targets set by the BRS. Who is gonna bring them to fruition?
It is vitally important to form partnerships, especially since we know that governments alone cannot solve environmental problems. They need to partner with academia, with the private sector who has the resources in order to mobilize innovation, new products, new approaches, new technologies, and so on. And of course with civil society, because they are in connection with the people. They work on the ground.
This is why it's important that we gather here together from different organizations and institutions that are talking about the importance of taking into account sound management of chemicals. What regulations are in place that eventually find themselves in legislation, in policy at the country level? Because even though we can be speaking at this global, very high level segment, the ultimate decision is also made at a national and sovereign level.
By leveraging synergies and by explaining that work on pollution is work also on protecting biodiversity and on saving our climate, we can move forward. But then beyond this sort of conceptual discussion, the real question is, where do these synergies have to happen?
All of the global environmental problems are tied together. I mean, the loss of biodiversity, climate change, and pollution are all intertwined because they are the effects of an unsustainable global pattern of consumption and production. So we got a systemic problem. To that systemic problem, we need to have a systemic approach to solve it.
We need to make waste visible at the very beginning of its creation and even before it is created. Our efforts should be directed toward prevention, at making the waste process transparent, and require producers and to take responsibility for waste until it's neutralized.
Do people know that when you take your clothes to dry cleaners, it's more likely going to be soaked in highly hazardous chemicals that are carcinogenic? Do our agricultural specialists, market vendors understand that using certain pesticides can cause various cancers? Do we understand the harmful impacts of plastics and how it impacts our biodiversity, human health, and environmental health?
We need to make sure that things that are seemingly invisible because we cannot see these chemicals, we know that they will manifest very visibly and we can see what their impacts are like. So we need to have a conversation about making visible the invisible.
We can safeguard our shared future for people and the planet by reducing pollution and promoting sustainable consumption and production, by making the transition to circular economy approaches, and by enhancing the implementation of the conventions with technical and financial capacity.
Here at the local level, where we are integrating, we have multifocal projects. That's what the Jeff has recommended. So money going to climate has impacts on biodiversity, chemicals, and waste.
The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are more than legal agreements. They show what we can accomplish when we work together. Let's reaffirm our commitment today, not just in words, but in action. I think if we get it right, we can change the trajectory of environmental and human health for generations to come.
If we get this right, we will ensure a legacy of successful implementation of chemicals management globally. A person only lasts one lifetime, but their history is remembered forever. Please, I urge you, get this right.
Thank you. I now have the pleasure to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Jürgen Vogel, President for Sustainable Development at the World Bank. You have the floor.
Thank you. And let's get this right. Can we get another round of applause for those who made that movie? I think it was terrific. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends on the panel and in the audience, a great pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the World Bank to assure you and reassure you of our continued and growing commitment to this agenda. This really matters. It matters for our ecosystem, it matters for our economies, it matters for the people. Pollution is having a dramatic impact around the world, and I think the video showed it very clearly that there are massive problems, but that there are also practical solutions. And I think all of you come together. I understand, I've been told in a record numbers, both in terms of high-level attendance at the ministerial level, but also in total numbers. I think more than 2,300 people, if I understand correctly, have signed up to be here. So it is in your hands to move this agenda forward. It's urgent, and it is very important that we walk away before the end of the week with further action and further progress. I've been asked to stick to the script, which I normally don't like to do, but for interpretation reasons, so I'll go through a few of the bullet points that from our perspective at the World Bank matter and where we can hopefully make a contribution. Despite many of these international agreements that address pollution, it does not get the attention that it deserves, particularly not when it comes to development finance and development funding. That's a huge problem. Of over $700 billion spent on health, for instance, in low and middle income countries over the last 20 years, only 1.5% went for fighting non-communicable diseases, including diseases that are related to pollution. And development assistance to fight chemical exposure is absolutely minimal, even though we know and we have a growing body of evidence that the returns are very, very high. But we're not investing in it, and we're not investing enough in it. The situation is unfortunately also similar with air pollution. The Clean Air Fund estimates that less than 1% of government development assistance goes into controlling air pollution, and yet we know that there are cost-effective solutions that can make a real difference. Our new World Bank research shows that we can reduce the number of people exposed to PM 2.5 concentrations above 25 micrograms per cubic meter globally by half by 2040, and that it is actually affordable to do this. An integrated approach combining conventional air quality management with energy and climate policies could reduce ambient air pollution-related mortality by 35%, from currently around 6.2 million yearly deaths to, in 2040, to about 4.1 million deaths. I mean, this is a very significant potential progress that we can make, and it is doable, it is affordable, but we must act on it. Now, on the World Bank side, we take a comprehensive approach that includes reducing pollution, implementing proper waste management, improving water and air quality, and promoting clean development. One of the focal areas has been the management of the POPs, the persistent organic pollutants, and in combination, in partnership with the Global Environment Facility, we have mobilized significant resources to eliminate these dangerous substances in many countries. In Egypt, for instance, we financed a project that eliminated about 500 tons of PCB oil and over 1,500 tons of other POPs. As a result of capacity building carried out in this project, Egypt then went on to decontaminate 1,000 tons of PCB oil without international assistance, reducing the health risk to more than 32 million people. Motivated by this example, the government of Iraq has partnered with us to develop a similar project to decontaminate about 3,000 tons of PCB containing equipment and wastes. But a lot of PCB still remains at large globally. We now have an opportunity and an obligation to demonstrate that environmental commitments here to eliminate PCB by 2028 are meaningful and achievable, including in developing countries. We are therefore again partnering with the GEF, the BRS Secretariat, the other GEF implementing agencies to develop a global elimination program for PCB, which we will launch here with a side event tomorrow evening. I think it's tomorrow evening. The first phase will be implemented by the African Development Bank, by UNEP, Inger's team, by UNDP, and the World Bank in 6 African countries, and aims to eliminate over 8,000 tons of PCB oil, supported by $44 million in the GEF, grant funding plus co-financing. This is designed to scale up, and more countries are wanting to join. I think one of the things we all really need to focus on, there are very good examples out there of what to do and how to do it, but we are not deliberate enough in scaling those good examples in other places. So we need to do everything we can to learn the lessons quickly, understand the financing models, improve them, and then roll them out on a larger scale. We certainly committed on our side to do this. The cost of PCB treatment is high, we know. However, public sector money will not be enough. Integrating PCB treatment with energy sector investments operations can help blend and leverage different sources of financing, including, of course, the GEF grant, public concessional commercial loans, private sector resources, and of course, also guarantees. At the World Bank Group, we are really working very hard to expand opportunities to guarantee, to bring private sector in and to have creative funding mechanisms that allow these things that often don't end up in a package and therefore often remain small, to get them to a scale where it really makes an impact. The PCB program also offers an opportunity to demonstrate what can be achieved if we work together and integrate environmental concerns with investments in energy and infrastructure. It's clear that cleaning up environmental pollution will and also must improve people's health, living conditions, and economic prospects. This requires the leadership of public institutions, but it does also require mobilization of the private sector resources. And cleaning up, I think the video made it very clear. Once again, cleaning up is not enough. We need to get ahead of the game with pollution. We need to deal with emerging threats before they become global problems. Plastic featured prominently. I know Inger's perennial quest to really move that agenda forward. Plastic was invented in 1907, and today it's everywhere, in our bodies everywhere. We want to have the functional and economic benefits of this innovative chemistry, but we can't forget the sustainability and long-term effect of these chemicals when they become economic success stories. We in the future got to get this right, because innovation is everywhere. There will continue to be new things coming on the market, and we cannot wait until they become a problem to begin to understand what it takes to contain their negative effects. In this context, the new global framework on chemicals is a remarkable achievement. The framework brings governments, industry, civil society, and other stakeholders together to make supply chains safer and improve the capacity in all countries for the sound management of these chemicals. At the World Bank, we are already working to support this framework, both by helping our client countries assess and improve their capability, their capacity for chemicals management, and by working with partners in the Inter-Organization Program for the Sound Management of Chemicals, the IOMC. The aim is to work with all stakeholders to transform markets and value chains, sending signals and creating incentives that can make chemicals less polluting. But also, all of us still have more work to do. We need to build capacity. Every country, in many countries, are struggling with capacity so that they have the data and understand the chemicals they use and their impacts. Countries need to measure and monitor chemicals, enforce compliance, and manage the chemical pollution. We need to make sure that policies and regulations, including environmental and safety standards, encourage the right behaviors. And it's particularly urgent to end subsidies on pollution. This is a topic at the World Bank we've paid a lot of attention to recently and will continue to double down on. Unfortunately, there are worldwide, globally, too many subsidies that are detrimental for the environment, for people's health, for climate, and everything, and biodiversity, and everything we care about. This is not only fossil fuel subsidies, it's agriculture subsidies, it's fisheries subsidies, and it's subsidies to support things without fully understanding or without fully taking into account what the negative consequences are. Repurposing some of these subsidies towards goals that all of you are discussing, not necessarily eliminating them, repurposing to get a better outcome is one of the big challenges in the policy agenda going forward. So let me emphasize again, at the bank, we are committed to scaling up our efforts, leveraging our investments, not a dollar in, dollar out. We try to leverage, we issue bonds, we go to the market, we try to multiply the few dollars that are available in that space to the maximum extent we can. Dealing with legacy pollution such as PCB is urgent, and strengthening management systems, particularly in countries with low capacity, is key. I hope that all of us can continue investing in management because collective efforts are crucial in this space. None of us can do this alone for the future well-being for our planet and our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vogel. I would now like to invite Mr. Rolf Payet, our Executive Secretary for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, to give a short introduction to the theme of our COPs.
Thank you very much, Maria Christina. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. In 2022, we packed our bags and we went to Stockholm. And we brought the HLS, the high-level segment, to celebrate the Stockholm Plus 50. And let me remind you that the Stockholm Plus 50 came about because of the growing amount of pollution and its impact on human development. And here we are today, talking about this very important crisis that we have before us. As I mentioned in my opening remarks in 2025 meetings of the BRS COPs, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions have had many achievements to celebrate. The world is certainly more protected from hazardous chemicals and waste than 50 years ago, when these conventions had not yet been adopted. But challenges, as we've seen, remain. And that's why our work today is even more important, is even more pertinent, and even more urgent. Still, pollution from hazardous chemicals and waste not only remains an environmental crisis in its own right, it's also a key driver of degradation of biodiversity and the persistent change in our climate, what we call climate change. Persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, accumulate in the food chain and threaten both humans and ecosystems alike. And that will go on for generations, as many have sought to call them forever chemicals. In agriculture, the widespread use of chemical pesticides and plastics as well has led to dangerous contamination of our soils and waterways. Meanwhile, plastic and electronic waste continue to grow at alarming rates. Yet, still a small proportion of that is properly recycled, fueling further environmental degradation. The ocean patch continues to grow, and today we've heard about the presence of microplastics in our bloodstream and in our brains. Poorly managed waste also releases greenhouse gases, impacting and contributing to climate change. Climate change itself then intensifies the spread and impact of hazardous substances. We are caught, ladies and gentlemen, in an endless, vicious circle of pollution. And we need to break this circle, and we need to break it today. In a nutshell, we cannot address biodiversity loss or climate change unless we start tackling pollution at home, at the national level, at the regional level, and at the global level. Protecting our planet requires urgent and coordinated action to reduce hazardous chemicals and promote sound waste management at all levels. Hence, Our proposal, dear ministers, is for us to discuss this afternoon and tomorrow morning how we can make those issues more visible and ensure that we can unpack the linkages and also understand the root causes and, at the end of the day, look for solutions, learn from each other, exchange from each other, and also leverage existing financial mechanisms that we have. Resources are limited in every sector. Even when we're negotiating the government budget, we know we have to fight and argue for the different, for health, for education, and so on. At the global level as well, resources is even more limited. But we need to see how together we can multiply those resources and ensure that they are impactful and bring changes at the local level in the front lines, where we have children, we have young people, we have mothers, we have the elderly who are most exposed today to those chemicals. So, our first roundtable is on pollution. And I hope I've given you the background for us to discuss. The second sub-theme is on circularity. It is definitely getting ahead of the game. When I meet with colleagues, I'm already saying, we are now talking about the energy transition. We are purchasing all of us electric cars. We feel good because we are contributing to reducing the climate emissions. But what's going to happen with those lithium batteries when we are done with them? What's going to happen with those cars that are so green today in 10 years or 5 years' time? We need to start thinking now about how we're going to protect the future from the products that we are designing today. We are making huge investments in artificial intelligence. All this computing power, how are we going to recycle them, recover the resources from them? How are we going to make them more energy efficient? Progress in the 21st century has to be combined with this life cycle or circular approach. And the Basel Convention has been, in fact, a leader in this because it promotes the prevention, because pollution costs, minimization, because efficiency gains, and of course, the sound management of hazardous and other waste reduces the cost of health treatment, the cost to the economy. And in fact, on the other hand, it also supports a system where waste becomes a resource, creating wealth, creating jobs, creating opportunities. So we are speaking the same language. The Rotterdam Convention also ensures the safe trade of hazardous chemicals through informed consent, so that we can ensure that the chemicals that we use, the people that are using them have adequate protection, that we use the right formulations, that we minimize leakages into the environment, and as a result, address food security. The third table and sub-theme is going to talk about means of implementation. I've alluded to this earlier in my introduction, but at the end of the day, it remains core to how we do it. And I think it's very important that we don't only focus on the money, because the money is only part of the solution. Because without the political commitment, without the capacity, without the technology, and without building systems that last, the resources will run out, and the project will run out, and then we'll look for another project. So in thinking about means of implementation, let us think about setting up systems that bring about this change and bring about this aspect of circularity, creating new opportunities, and looking at how we can transform our civilization into one which is sustainable, which footprint on the planet is effectively reduced, decoupling, as I said, the economy from pollution. So we must strengthen our traditional support mechanisms. We must move away from just thinking about public sources. Already public sources are under a lot of pressure. Governments are facing a lot of pressure to improve infrastructure, to meet certain urgent needs. We need to work with the private sector. We need to work with them to see how we can mobilize resources. We need to be able to blend, we call it blend, private and public resources. We need to see how we can de-risk the investments, because investments in the waste and chemical sector are highly risky. I'm talking to chemists and colleagues here who works in toxics. We have to have special arrangements for destruction of those toxic chemicals. So they come with a lot of risk. So we need to find ways to de-risk. Investment in bonds, the creation of blue bonds, green bonds. I will not even mention brown bonds because this is going in a negative way, in the positive way. Development bonds that actually create the investment platform for us to produce. And as mentioned before, buying extended producer responsibility and offering opportunities for exchange and for us to innovate and to move forward. So by aligning financial flows with sustainability objectives, we can, and we have shown in the past, unlock the funding necessary for us to address this triple planetary crisis of pollution. We can do it. So I look forward to listening to you over the next afternoon and tomorrow morning. And I'm inviting all the ministers to be as vocal as possible and to engage in the roundtables. And after you've completed your discussions, I have the enormous task, together with my team, to summarize all this into something that can guide our work here at the conventions, but also help support the other UN organizations that are here with us and other international organizations that are here with us in prioritizing and working with us in addressing this triple planetary crisis. So with those few words, I welcome you to a photo session and then moving into the building next door where we have set up the tables ready for our roundtable discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rolf. And with this, we're now coming to the end of our opening ceremony today. Allow me to say a few housekeeping announcements that you will need to follow. First of all, I would like to invite all of our guests, ministers, deputy ministers, and their equivalents, to proceed to join us outside, as Mr. Payet mentioned, for a group photo, a family photo. For that, you need to leave this venue using the left-hand side doors. So for those here in the podium, you have to go out on the right. But for you, those sitting at your seats, please leave by the left side. Follow the red carpet all the way out until you come out of the building. And out there, you'll find my colleagues who will guide you to the location where the photo is going to be taken. I would like to also let you know that following the ministerial photo, you're all kindly requested to follow the Secretariat staff across the street to the Varembe Center, where the roundtable sessions will be taking place. You are all reminded that there will be no interpretation during the roundtable sessions, and that upon arrival to the venue across the street, you will be provided with information as to where you can find your table. You should have already received by now information for the seating arrangements for the roundtables. Also, coffee and tea will be available across the street. With this, I thank you all for your attention, and I encourage you to please leave the room using the door by the left-hand side. Thank you very much. There will be a plenary session that will be continuing in this room. So for ministers and deputy ministers, if you can leave now, thank you very much.